"Get away from her, now." That's what Soldier Arthur said when he saw the little girl in despair, with a strange man standing right behind her. The girl was sitting on the ground, curled up, arms wrapped around her knees, and her face hidden. She was crying softly, but the desperation was clear. Nothing about that scene felt right. Arthur kept his eyes locked on the man. For a moment, nobody moved. Time felt frozen, like the air around them had gotten heavier. The tension was almost tangible. The soldier took a step forward, then another, and another still, with the same firmness of someone who had once walked through war zones. He observed every detail, the girl's eyes, the way the man carried himself, the distance between them. The man stayed where he was. He crossed his arms, tilted his head slightly to the side, like he was trying to figure out who this old man was, who had just shown up out of nowhere. When Arthur got close enough, the man finally broke the silence. He said he was the girl's father, tried to sound calm, but there was something about the way he spoke that didn't sit right. He said it was all just a misunderstanding, that the girl had run away, that she was sensitive, didn't know how to deal with frustration. He spoke with a hint of irritation, like the whole situation was just an inconvenience, like the girl was causing yet another headache he now had to deal with. Arthur listened, but he didn't believe a word of it. His instincts told him something else entirely. The girl showed no signs of trust. She avoided looking at the man. Her body seemed frozen. Every word he spoke made her shrink a little more. The man said the soldier was mistaken, that he didn't need to get involved, that he was just a stranger interfering in something that didn't concern him. He called the situation hysteria, an overreaction, said kids cry over anything. Arthur calmly replied that he had seen that kind of talk before. It always started the same way, with soft excuses trying to justify what couldn't be justified. There was always a story ready. But it was the child's silence that told the real truth. The girl didn't speak, but every movement said a lot. The way she trembled, the way she avoided looking at her father, the way she seemed like she wanted to disappear. That wasn't acting. That wasn't drama. That was fear. The man insisted, tried to get closer to her, said she needed to learn how to obey, that he couldn't take it anymore, that he always had to come get her because of tantrums like this. He kept trying to explain himself, but his words were losing strength by the second. It was only then that the girl finally spoke, in a quiet voice. She said she didn't want to go with him, said she was scared. Arthur confirmed he heard her, and made it clear she wouldn't be forced to do anything. The man laughed, asked if an old man like him really thought he could fix other people's lives, said nobody there knew what was actually going on, that they were judging without understanding. He threatened to call the police. Arthur replied that he already had, that the situation would be handled by the authorities, not through force or intimidation. The man lost his temper, tried to grab the girl by the arm. She screamed, cried louder, resisted. Arthur grabbed the man by the wrist, pulled him away from her, and told him to back off. He said there would be no more yelling, no more abuse, no more silence, that as long as he was standing there, no one would hurt that girl again. The man tried to justify himself, saying he was just nervous, that he didn't know what he was doing, that it was just stress, but his words didn't carry any weight anymore. No one believed him now. The girl kept crying, but now there was something different in her cry. There was still fear, yes, but also relief. For the first time, someone had stepped in. For the first time, someone didn't walk away. But the calm didn't last long. As Arthur was getting ready to talk to the police, who were on their way, the man took advantage of a moment of distraction. He shoved the old man hard, grabbed the girl by the arm, and ran toward the street. The girl screamed, tried to break free, but his grip was tight, brutal. Arthur fell to the ground, but got up quickly. He ran after them, shouting for them to stop, calling for help, but it was too late. A car sped off and vanished into traffic. The soldier stood there in the middle of the street, out of breath, his heart racing. The image of the girl being dragged away was burned into his mind. He felt an old rage rise up inside him, the same one he used to feel whenever he saw innocent people getting hurt, while the world looked the other way. If you're curious and want to hear more powerful stories like this one, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, because we're not done yet. Arthur walked home slower than ever. Every step felt too heavy. His shoulders were hunched, like he was carrying the weight of the world on them. He closed the door behind him and leaned against it for a few seconds. The silence in the house, once a refuge, now felt cruel. No sound, no distraction, just him, And the memory, the image of the girl being taken by force, wouldn't leave his mind. Her screams, the fear in her eyes, the man's hand gripping her thin, fragile arm. It played in his head like a movie, always the same, without pause, without relief. He sat on the edge of the bed, hands over his face. The anger burned inside him, but even stronger than the anger was the guilt. He had been there. He had seen everything. He had promised to protect her, and he failed. Failing her felt like more than a mistake. It felt like betrayal, not of her, but of himself, of everything he believed in, of everything he had lived through. This wasn't the first time he had seen an innocent person get hurt. In war, it happened all the time. Children caught in chaos, families torn apart, homes destroyed by cruel hands. And he always carried the scars of that. What he didn't expect was to feel that same pain again. So close, so real. He closed his eyes and was pulled back into the past. He remembered the face of a little girl he met in a bombed-out village years ago. That same frightened look, that same screaming silence. He tried to save her, fought for her, but he didn't make it in time. That loss had stayed with him ever since. It was a wound that never healed. Arthur stood up and walked to the window. The city was calm, but he couldn't see peace anywhere. He had to do something. He couldn't just sit and wait. The police would act, sure, but he knew how slow the system could be. He knew how these cases got lost in the middle of so many others. And that girl couldn't wait. He went to the closet, pulled out an old wooden box he hadn't opened in years. Inside were photos, old documents, letters he never read again, and a military ID. He picked up the badge and looked at it for a few seconds. His full name was still there, the serious look in the photo, the numbers that once meant pride. Now, they meant responsibility. He grabbed a notebook and started writing down everything he remembered. The car the man drove off in, the color, the approximate model, details of his face, clothes, the name he had mentioned, anything that might help. He remembered a habit he'd lost over time, trusting his instincts. In war, that instinct saved lives. And now, it told him the girl was still nearby, that the man hadn't planned it. It was impulsive, and people who act on impulse make mistakes. Arthur just had to find them. That night, he didn't sleep. He didn't close his eyes for a second. The clock kept turning, the hands moving forward, but time felt frozen. Only one thought kept him standing. He had a promise to keep. He didn't know the girl's full name, didn't know where she lived, didn't know much at all, but that didn't matter. He remembered how she looked at him. He knew she believed, if only for a moment, that he would save her, and that was everything. The next morning, Arthur got dressed early. Simple t-shirt, old jacket, worn-out boots. He grabbed the car keys, his notebook, and walked out without looking back. The girl's face was clearer than ever in his mind. That look, that silent plea for help, and the pain of having lost her right there, in his hands. He went back to the park where everything had happened. Every corner seemed filled with memories. The tree where she had been sitting, the exact spot where he shouted, the ground where he fell. The marks were still there, in all the right places, as if the scene had been frozen in time. But now, there was no one around. The world had moved on. Only he was still stuck in that moment. He walked around for hours, asked vendors, joggers, elderly people walking nearby. No one knew anything. Some didn't even remember seeing a girl crying. Others thought it was just another family argument. Arthur thanked them, but inside, he felt the anger rising. People saw, but didn't really look. The world had gotten used to turning away. He went to the nearest police station, told them everything he knew, showed his notes, described the man, the car, the moment she was taken. The officers were polite, took down the information, said they were investigating, but their eyes said something else. Just another case, just another number, one more incident among so many others. Arthur walked out more certain than ever that he couldn't just sit and wait. If he left it up to the system, that girl would disappear, just like so many others. He couldn't let that happen. He went back home and picked up the phone, started calling people he hadn't spoken to in years, old service buddies, names he knew from past operations, friends who had taken different paths, but still carried the same sense of mission. Some didn't answer. Others said they couldn't help, but a few responded with exactly what he needed: attention. One of them, a civil surveillance specialist, promised to check camera footage from the area where the man escaped. Another, who worked in private security, suggested places where people tended to hide after doing something wrong, off-the-grid spots, far from everything, where no one asks questions. Arthur wrote it all down. He returned to the place where the car disappeared and began walking through the nearby streets, block by block, asking around, watching, looking for anything that seemed out of place. At a gas station a few kilometers away, an attendant remembered seeing a similar car. He recalled the girl in the back seat, and the man, looking visibly irritated, said they seemed in a rush, heading out toward the highway. Arthur's heart beat faster. It wasn't much, but it was something. With an old map spread out on the table in his living room, Arthur plotted routes, nearby towns, possible locations. His mind, once trained for combat, was now focused on tracking down something far more valuable than enemies: justice. He knew the odds were slim, but he didn't care. What mattered was not stopping. Not as long as he knew she was still out there, with that man. He spent the night building a network of information, took down notes from old colleagues, reports on suspicious locations, and files from past disappearances that seemed similar. Logic told him it was crazy, but he had never trusted logic when it came to protecting someone. He trusted instinct, and his instinct was screaming that she was close, that there was no time to waste. The early morning hours came, and he was still standing. His eyes were tired, but alert. His body showed his age, but his spirit was wide awake. He looked again at the notebook where he'd been writing everything down. On the cover, he wrote a single sentence: "She's not alone," because now he was in the fight again, but this time for someone who maybe didn't even realize how much she needed to be saved. They were long days, days where Arthur woke up early and went to bed late, never allowing himself to feel weak, never accepting the idea that he might be searching in the dark. Everywhere he went, he asked questions, showed a rough sketch with their descriptions: the girl's eyes, the man's expression, the model of the car, the direction they took. Most people didn't know anything. Some tried to help, others just shook their heads with indifference. But Arthur didn't give up. Every door that closed only made him knock on 3 more. And then, on a cloudy morning, something changed. He pulled into a roadside gas station, already exhausted, his hands cold, his eyes locked in focus. The attendant was young, a bit distracted, but polite. Arthur asked, just like he always did, showed his papers, described the situation, and for the first time, he got a different answer. The attendant said he remembered. A man had stopped by 2 days earlier, late in the afternoon. He seemed agitated, impatient, pulled the car in fast, and kept looking around the whole time, like he was afraid of being seen. The girl was with him, in the back seat. She never got out of the car. The attendant didn't hear anything, but he noticed that she looked off, drained, still, like she wasn't really there. He said he had a feeling something was wrong, but didn't know what to do. Arthur felt his chest tighten. For the first time since that day in the park, someone had seen her. She was alive. She had been there, so close, and yet, still out of reach. He asked which direction they went. The attendant said they headed south, toward a small, remote town, known for its rural areas and few security cameras, the kind of place where someone could disappear easily. Arthur didn't hesitate. He thanked the man, grabbed his notebook, scribbled a few quick notes, and got back in the car. He drove for hours. The road felt endless, but he never slowed down. The scenery blurred past the windows, but her image stayed clear in his mind. The girl sitting on the ground, crying. That man's hand yanking her away by force. The scream caught in her throat. It all came back like it was happening again. Every mile he drove was a reminder of everything that had gone wrong, but it was also one step closer to making it right. The pain in his chest hadn't gone away, but now it came with something new. A quiet hope, fragile, but real. She was out there, and he was getting closer. He made only brief stops, just what was necessary: gas, water, more questions. He showed his notebook at another roadside stop, and once again heard confirmation. The car had passed through there. They were on the right track. It was as if, finally, the world was starting to respond. Arthur remembered feeling this way before. Missions where the odds were slim, but a single clue changed everything. And now, with an innocent life at stake, every detail mattered. Every person who remembered the girl gave him another burst of strength to keep going. The town up ahead was small, surrounded by fields and narrow streets, the kind of place no one would hide in for long, unless no one was looking. Arthur entered the town with sharp eyes and a heavy heart. It was a quiet place, with narrow streets and old buildings. The kind of town that felt frozen in time, where everyone knew each other, and any new face stood out. But in that silence, there was something more. A subtle discomfort, like something was hiding in plain sight. He stopped at a roadside diner and asked a few discreet questions, showed his notebook, described the man, the car, the girl. Most of the answers were no. Simple folks, too busy with their own lives. But a woman, the owner of a small local market, said something that caught his attention. She mentioned that a strange man had rented a house on the edge of town. No one knew his name. He arrived quickly, didn't speak to anyone, kept to himself, always closed off, always wary. And sometimes, she said, people heard muffled screams coming from inside. Arthur thanked her and headed to the place she described. The house was old, wooden, hidden behind tall, overgrown trees. The vegetation around it was wild and unkept, like time had forgotten it. He parked the car at a distance and watched. Nothing moved, no lights, no sounds, but something told him she was there. He stayed there for hours, watching, saw a shadow move past one of the windows, saw the silhouette of someone sitting in a chair near the door, and for a brief moment, he saw a pale, small face behind the curtain. He knew he had to act. There was no time to wait for backup. He couldn't risk losing her again. He grabbed a flashlight, his notebook, and an old combat knife. He moved toward the house in silence, step by step, just like he had done so many times on past missions. But this time was different. There wasn't an enemy on the other side. There was a child, a victim, a life. He reached the back door, tried the handle. It turned easily. The house smelled of mold, dust, and abandonment. Every step was careful. He moved through the hallways with full attention, listening to every noise, feeling every shift in the air. He found the girl in a small room, windowless, lit only by a sliver of light coming through the door. She was sitting in the corner, arms wrapped around her legs. She looked at him without saying a word. That same look as before, fear and hope tangled together. Arthur knelt down and told her he was there to take her home, that she was safe now, that he was going to keep his promise. She hesitated for a few seconds, then stood up. As they moved toward the door, the man appeared in the hallway, his face twisted with rage. He shouted, told her to get back, and threatened Arthur with a piece of wood. The old soldier didn't flinch. He stared the man down with the steady gaze of someone who refused to lose again, told him he wasn't leaving without her, and if the man tried to stop him, there would be consequences. The fight was quick. The man charged, but Arthur reacted, dodged, took him to the ground, and pinned him down. He tied the man's wrists using one of the straps from his backpack. Then he called the police and gave them the location. While they waited, he sat with the girl on the front porch of the house. For the first time, she held his hand. They didn't say a word, but in that quiet, something was restored, something fear hadn't been able to destroy. The house fell silent after the police took the man away in handcuffs. Arthur stayed on the porch with the girl beside him. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The day was ending, but it felt like something new was just beginning. The girl didn't let go of Arthur's hand. She still wasn't speaking, but she didn't need to. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon, and there was something different in her. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with a quiet peace, like her soul had finally stopped screaming, if only for a moment. Arthur watched her carefully. He knew he couldn't push for words or questions. Some kinds of pain are best explained by silence, and he understood that. He had learned that, for certain wounds, the most important thing is simply being there. She rested her head gently on his shoulder. Arthur closed his eyes for a moment. He felt that gesture was worth more than any speech. It was a sign of trust, of surrendering to care, of relief. Not long after, the social workers arrived. They talked with Arthur, asked questions, and took the girl with them. She looked back as she got into the car. For the first time, she waved. A simple gesture, small, but full of meaning. Arthur waved back and stood there, watching the car disappear down the road. In the days that followed, Arthur felt an emptiness he couldn't quite name. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't relief. It was longing, not for something he had lost, but for something that had started to become part of him. He missed her presence, the shared silence. The mission he didn't yet feel was complete. He went back home and tried to return to his routine, but everything felt smaller, without purpose. He spent his days thinking about the girl, wondering if she was okay, if she was sleeping in peace, if she had eaten, if she still remembered him. He decided to find her. went to the shelter where he'd learned she was staying, spoke with the staff, answered questionnaires, went through evaluations. He explained who he was, what had happened, and what he felt, and he asked to see her. The first visit was quiet. She sat on the other side of the table, not knowing what to say. Arthur didn't say much either. He simply asked how she was. She nodded and smiled. Small, discreet, but real. Little by little, the visits became more frequent. She started to talk. Not everything, but enough. She talked about what she liked, what she dreamed about, asked about his past, wanted to know how he'd learned to be so calm, so strong. Arthur answered simply, said life had taught him, that he hadn't always been that way, that pain had shaped him but didn't break him, and that now, maybe, he was learning from her too. Then came the question he never expected. She asked if she could live with him. She said it quietly, but firmly, said she felt safe with him, that she wasn't afraid, that she wanted a home. Arthur stayed silent for a few seconds, and then he said yes, without hesitation. The process was long. Evaluations, interviews, paperwork, but he got through all of it. Each step was one step closer, and when he finally got the confirmation that he would have custody of the girl, he cried, alone, sitting in the same chair where he had once made the promise not to rest. Now, the promise was fulfilled, and a new chapter was ready to begin. The beginning wasn't easy. Even after gaining legal custody of the girl, Arthur knew the real challenge was still ahead. She carried deep wounds, silent traumas that don't heal with words. But he was there, ready to be the safe harbor she had never known. The first few weeks together were filled with silence and observation. She took a long time to fall asleep, was startled by sudden noises, and avoided crowded places. Arthur respected every boundary. He left her bedroom door slightly open, made her coffee the way she liked it, left simple notes on the table with messages like, "I'm here," or "It's okay to feel afraid." A routine slowly started to take shape. She began helping in the kitchen, picking out books to read before bed, showing interest in the little details of daily life. On some days, she would just sit next to him in silence, and that was enough. There was no rush. There was presence. Arthur changed too. He felt lighter, more alive. It was as if, by taking care of her, he was also caring for the parts of himself that had long been forgotten. He started to laugh more easily, sleep better, speak more gently. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. Justice against the man who had hurt her took its course. He was tried, convicted, and stripped of all parental rights. There was no appeal, no apology. The truth was heard, acknowledged, and finally protected. Arthur attended every hearing with a steady heart, holding the girl's hand whenever she needed it. She, in turn, began to find her voice. She told her story with courage, helped other children in similar situations, wrote letters to girls in shelters, telling them that the pain fades, that peace comes, that good people do exist. She was no longer seen as a victim, but as an example. One day, she told Arthur she had a dream. She wanted to grow up and help kids like her. She wanted to study, to become a social worker or a psychologist. She wanted to make sure no girl ever felt as alone as she once had. Arthur listened, eyes full of tears, and simply said, "I believe in you." Their house, once silent and marked by pain, had become a place of refuge. There was laughter in the kitchen, plants growing in the garden, drawings stuck to the fridge, and above all, there was peace. Arthur knew that pain never completely disappears, but he also knew that love has a quiet kind of strength, one that can rebuild what was once broken. He looked at her and saw something new beginning, and inside him, something old beginning to heal. The days began to turn into something Arthur never thought he'd experience again. The house, once quiet and lonely, came to life. The girl slowly became part of everything. She had her own little corner in the living room, with books, drawings, and small decorations. There were flowers on the windowsill, and new smells in the kitchen. Time, once heavy and slow, now passed faster, filled with simple routines, rich with meaning. She started calling Arthur Grandpa. The first time she said it, he went silent for a long few seconds, unsure if he should laugh or cry. He simply smiled, eyes full of tears, and replied with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. "Well then, Grandpa's gonna make you the best coffee you've ever had today." The fear didn't disappear all at once. There were still nights when she woke up scared, days when silence would take over again. But now she knew she could run to that room next door. She knew there would be a steady hand to hold, a calm voice to whisper that everything was going to be okay. Arthur relearned how to dream. He started making plans, built a garden in the backyard with her, taught her how to ride a bike, introduced her to old movies that always made him laugh. He discovered there was so much more inside him than he ever imagined. And she, without even realizing it, was healing pieces of his soul with every gesture. Every bit of trust she gave him, every spontaneous smile. She learned too that the world could be kind, that not every adult yelled, that love could exist without expecting anything in return, that silence, when shared, could be a safe place. One night, Arthur walked into her room to say goodnight and found a notebook open on the bed. Inside, written in small, steady letters, was a single sentence: "Thank you for staying." That was it, but it was everything. That night, Arthur couldn't sleep. He sat in his armchair, staring out the window at the sky. He thought about how much a life could change, thought about how, without even trying, he had become exactly what she needed, and how, without even knowing, she had become what he had been missing all along. The silence gained color. The house, meaning, and love, finally, had found a place to bloom. They didn't talk about the future with big words, but they lived each day with the quiet certainty that now they belonged to each other, and that was enough.